Hey, stop everything you're doing right now. You know that moment when you blurt out a sentence and immediately think, wow, I shouldn't have said that. Now I'm going to tell you 7 things truly intelligent men never say. And no, it's not about being perfect. It's about understanding that sometimes what you don't say says much more about who you are than any pretty word. Stay until the end because the last one will affect you in ways you can't even imagine. Look, I spent years observing people. Like really years. I'd sit in those cafes drinking coffee after coffee, just watching how people behave, how they speak, how they interact. And you know what I noticed? The wisest men, the ones who truly impress, they have a secret. And it's not having the answer to everything. It's not knowing the capital of every country or quoting beautiful quotes from philosophers. Their secret is much simpler. They know when to keep quiet. Seems obvious, right? But how many times have you gotten into trouble just because you didn't shut your mouth at the right time? How many times have you said something that diminished your credibility in front of others? Today we're going to dive deep into these 7 phrases. And look, I'm not going to judge you because I've already said all of these things. The difference is, I learned the hard way that these words don't lead to anything good. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's go on this journey together. Oh, and subscribe to the channel because whenever I discover something new about how to live better, I want you to be the first to know. You know that phrase we blurt out without even thinking? Oh, I already know that. It seems harmless, right? It even sounds like confidence. But let me tell you something. This phrase reveals something very ugly. A closed mind. An intelligent men. They know that the second you convince yourself there's nothing more to learn, you've frozen. You've stopped growing. Personal story. Look, I learned this the hard way. A few years ago, I was working with a mentor. An incredible guy, you know. The kind of person who's been through so much that when he talks, you feel the weight of experience. One day, we were reviewing a process. Something I'd done about 100 times. He started to explain something, and without thinking twice, I cut him off. Yeah, I already know that. He looked at me. He didn't say anything. He just gave me that look. You know that look that says more than 1,000 words. And he continued. That night, when I was home, it hit me. I hadn't just interrupted him. I'd robbed myself. Robbed me of the chance to hear something he saw and I didn't. Because he had years of experience that aren't written in any manual. Things you only learn by living. Philosophical reflection, Marcus Aurelius. That Roman emperor, who was also a philosopher, said something very bluntly. You can't learn anything when you think you already know everything. Think about it. When you say, I already know, what you're really saying is I have nothing more to learn here. And that's not intelligence. It's arrogance dressed up as competence, ego, that need we have to appear smart to protect the image we've built, ends up being exactly what blocks our growth. Practical example, let me tell you about a carpenter I knew. The guy had decades of experience. One day, a young apprentice started explaining a technique to him. A technique he'd probably already mastered for a long time. Do you know what he did? He stayed quiet. He listened attentively. He asked questions, and at the end, he even thanked the boy for sharing. Afterwards, I asked him, why didn't you say you already knew all that? He smiled and said, because sometimes you learn more by listening to someone else's way of seeing things. That's true wisdom. It's a kind of intelligence that doesn't need to be shown off. Practical applications. So, here's a tip. The next time you think, "Oh, I've heard that before," take a deep breath and listen anyway. Not because you need to please the person, but because you might pick up on something new, a detail, a different perspective, a nuance that deepens your understanding. And even if you don't learn anything new from that conversation, you practiced humility, you showed respect, and over time, that makes you someone worth listening to. In Stoic philosophy, we call this self-mastery, the ability to set aside pride and choose clarity, the strength to be an eternal student of life. And ultimately, that's the kind of intelligence that lasts forever. A few years ago, I worked with a guy named Robert. Smart, experienced guy, the kind of leader who seemed to carry the entire company on his shoulders without complaint. But there was one phrase he used all the time, like an automatic reflex: "That's impossible." Every time a new idea came up, whether it was entering a different market, changing an old system, or even approaching a difficult client, he'd cut it off with those two words. At first it seemed sensible. After all, who has time to chase impossible dreams, right? But over time, one thing became painfully clear. Every time he said "that's impossible," he wasn't describing the situation. He was describing himself, his limits. His fear and philosophers understood this kind of thinking all too well. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's exactly what Robert was doing. He wasn't analyzing the situation objectively. He was projecting his own fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of being wrong, fear of trying and failing. It's a silent fear, the kind that doesn't even feel like fear. It disguises itself as logic, caution, practicality. But beneath it all, it's the thing that keeps you small. Let me tell you about a project I worked on years later. The budget was tight, the deadline was shorter than seemed reasonable, and the team lacked experience. Every logical fiber in my body screamed that it couldn't be done. But instead of saying "this is impossible," I tried something different. I asked myself, what can I control today? What's the next small step I can take? Do you know what happened? That project was one of the most successful I've ever worked on. Not because we performed miracles, but because we refused to be paralyzed by the enormity of the challenge. We focused on the next step, and then the next. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not over external events." And that was the difference. When a man says this is impossible, he's declaring defeat before the fight has even begun. Intelligent men know that what often seems impossible is just the unknown. It's not a wall. It's a challenge for you to take a step forward. They understand that strength isn't built by winning every battle, but by showing up again and again, especially when the odds seem unfavorable. This is the essence of Stoic courage. It's not blind optimism. It's disciplined persistence. In life, we are constantly called to do difficult things, and the moment we label them as impossible, we close the door on ourselves. But the man who learns to take the next step, no matter how small, opens doors no one else can see. This isn't just intelligence. It's wisdom forged through effort. Have you ever stopped to think about how many opportunities you've missed just because you thought they were impossible before you even tried? And speaking of closing doors on yourself, there's another phrase that does exactly that, but in an even more dangerous way. One of the most destructive phrases a man can say is, "It's not my fault." It seems simple. It even seems justifiable most of the time. When things go wrong at work, in a relationship, In life, it's natural to want to defend yourself, to make it clear that it's someone else's fault. But here's the hard truth. Every time you push responsibility away, you give away your power. Let me tell you about a friend of mine, Miguel. He lost an important client, a big one of those that makes a difference in revenue, and he was quick to explain why it wasn't his fault. The client was difficult. The market was changing. His team didn't deliver on time. All true to a point. But while he was busy explaining why it wasn't his fault, the opportunity to learn from it and improve slipped away. He got stuck, repeating the same mistakes, convinced it was always someone else's problem. What he didn't realize is that by refusing to take any responsibility, he relinquished the one thing that could have changed the outcome: control over himself. The Stoics believed that we should focus on what is within our control and let go of the rest. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." And that's the key. When we say it's not my fault, we place the power to change the situation in someone else's hands. We expect them to fix it. We expect them to apologize. We expect them to improve. But when we accept even a small piece of responsibility, we immediately regain control. We shift from passive to active, from powerless to powerful. In my own life, I've found that owning my part, no matter how small, opens doors I hadn't seen before. It can be as simple as admitting I didn't communicate clearly or I could have prepared better, even if others have made bigger mistakes. This willingness to take responsibility changes something inside. It builds trust, both with yourself and with the people around you. It shows that you're a man who doesn't wait to be rescued or justified. You take action. The difference between blame and responsibility. Look, blame is easy. Responsibility is hard, but responsibility is where strength lies. The Stoics remind us that we're not here to escape difficulty. We're here to rise above it. And rising above it begins with asking, what can I do differently next time? That's how smart men lead. By not finding blame, by finding ways forward. Think of a recent situation that went wrong. It could be at work, at home, or in a relationship. Now, instead of listing everything others did wrong, ask, what was my part in it? What could I have done differently? It doesn't have to be all the blame, just a small part, and see how that changes your perspective. And since we're talking about taking control of your life, there's another phrase that does exactly the opposite. That keeps you trapped in the illusion of total independence. One of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself is, I don't need help. It sounds noble on the surface, independent, strong. It's a phrase we've been conditioned to admire, especially in a culture that celebrates the lone wolf. The self-made man who forges his own path and carries his burdens without complaint. But the truth beneath is much less heroic. Refusing to ask for help is often not a reflection of strength. It's pride. Silent, corrosive, and blinding. It isolates you. It makes you believe that suffering in silence is a virtue. And over time, it erodes the very resilience you think you're protecting. Let me tell you about Abraham Lincoln. A man history paints as a lonely figure, stoic, overwhelmed, carrying the weight of a broken nation on his shoulders. But what often goes unreported is how much Lincoln leaned on others during the darkest days of the Civil War. He surrounded himself with advisors who challenged him. He sought opinions that contradicted his own, not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood that wisdom isn't born of isolation. It's shaped by the courage to admit you don't have all the answers. At the brutal Battle of Antietam, Lincoln visited General McClellan. Despite their disagreements, he sought strategic perspective. He spent countless hours with his cabinet, often called a team of rivals because he valued their perspectives even when they clashed with his. This wasn't weakness. It was strength measured by humility. Philosophers were clear on this. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man of his time, wrote openly about the debt he owed to his mentors, teachers, and friends. In his meditations, he catalogued the lessons he learned from each of them, recognizing how their wisdom shaped his own. The world's most powerful emperor didn't pretend to have all the answers. Why should we? But many of us do. We tell ourselves that asking for help is admitting defeat, that if we reach out, it's because we failed to be strong enough. But this belief is a trap. It keeps you trapped inside your own head, slowly drowning in problems you should never face alone. And even worse, it robs those around you of the chance to offer what they have. When we refuse to ask for help, we deny others the opportunity to give. We sever the mutual support that unites people. I fell into this trap too. There was a time when I felt I had to carry it all. Work, family, the endless pressures of trying to live up to an image of strength. I thought keeping it all together meant keeping it all to myself, and all it did was wear me down. The turning point came when I finally admitted to someone I trusted that I couldn't do it alone. Do you know what I found? It wasn't judgment. It was understanding, support, and that small moment of humility gave me the energy and clarity I'd been missing for years. I realized that true strength isn't about how long you can stand alone. It's about knowing when to lend a hand and when to accept one. The Stoics teach us that we are part of a greater whole. We were made for cooperation, for mutual aid. Epictetus reminds us that no man is an island. And when we pretend otherwise, we fight against the natural order of life. Strength is not diminished by asking for help. It's defined by that, because asking for help requires courage. It requires honesty. And these are the marks of an intelligent and wise man who knows that carrying burdens alone isn't noble. It's unnecessary. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "I can do this, I don't need anyone," stop for a moment. Ask yourself if it's strength speaking or disguised pride. And remember Lincoln, who led with wisdom and humility, knowing full well that even the strongest men need others to stand. And since we're talking about self-imposed limitations, there's another phrase that closes doors before they're even opened. One of the most damaging lies a man can tell himself is, "I'm too old for this." It comes out quietly, sometimes disguised as practicality or even self-deprecating humor. But underneath lies something much heavier. A resignation, a belief that the best chapters have already been written, and there's not much left worth pursuing. It's the kind of thinking that closes doors long before they need to be closed. Let me tell you about a guy named Harry Bernstein at 93. After spending his life working as a magazine editor and raising a family, he decided to write his first book. He called it The Invisible Wall, a memoir about his childhood in a poor English town divided by religion and prejudice. It was rejected by several publishers before finally being published. He was 96 when the book hit the shelves. That book achieved international acclaim. It was translated into several languages. It touched the lives of people around the world. He wrote 3 more books after that. Harry didn't buy the lie. that he was too old. He didn't tell himself it was too late. He had something to say, something to create, and he did. What impressed me most about Harry's story wasn't its success. It was courage. The courage to believe that life still had more in store for him. That even in his 90s, he wasn't finished growing, learning, or contributing. And this courage isn't exclusive to men like Harry. It's a choice we all face. Sometimes daily do we listen to the voice that tells us we've missed our chance? Or do we embrace the possibility that as long as we have breath, we have purpose? The Stoics taught that age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this truth, reminding himself that death is inevitable, yes. But until it arrives, our duty is to live as fully and virtuously as we can. He believed that wisdom often comes with age, not because of the passing years, but because those who remain curious and courageous deepen their understanding over time. Growth doesn't stop with age. It matures. I've seen men in their 60s learning new skills, starting businesses, mentoring young leaders. I've also met others who let the weight of regret and the passing of time convince them to retreat from life. The difference isn't circumstance, it's mindset. A man who says I'm too old for this has already closed the door. But a man who asks, what can I do now, opens it wide again. Age doesn't disqualify you from living boldly. It gives you more to offer: experience, clarity, resilience. These aren't signs of someone who's finished. They're the tools of someone who's just beginning. And that's the Stoic path. Keep learning, keep fighting until the very end.